I turned 30 on a Tuesday. For the first time in my entire life, I honestly believed my parents hadn't forgotten. When I opened my bedroom door at 6:30 that morning, colorful balloons floated near the ceiling. White flowers lined the hallway. Wrapped boxes set neatly beside the staircase. Even the dining room table looked decorated. I froze. For several seconds, I couldn't move. 30 birthdays. 30 years of being the daughter who remembered everyone else's special day while quietly watching mine disappear beneath someone else's celebration. But this looked different. A smile slowly crossed my face before I could stop it. Maybe they finally realized. Maybe 30 mattered. Maybe this was the year I stopped feeling invisible. I walked downstairs almost afraid to breathe, taking in every little detail. Fresh flowers, new tablecloth, silver ribbons, a bakery box sitting on the kitchen counter. Someone had spent real money, real effort, for me. Then I noticed the envelope. My name wasn't written on it. Neither was anyone else's. I opened it anyway. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Load all luggage before 8 o'clock. Don't forget Olivia's garment bag. I stared at the list. My smile faded only slightly. Maybe they were trying to surprise me after breakfast. Maybe Olivia was helping organize everything. I wanted to believe that. Looking back, I was doing what I'd done my entire life, finding excuses for people who never deserved them. Still smiling, I picked up the first suitcase. It was surprisingly heavy. Then another. Then another. Designer luggage. Brand new tags. Luxury travel stickers, already attached. That confused me. Olivia hadn't mentioned traveling. But Olivia rarely mentioned anything unless it benefited her. By the time I carried the fifth suitcase outside, a black luxury van pulled into the driveway. A driver stepped out. He didn't ask for directions. He already knew exactly where he was. My father walked outside seconds later, wearing a linen jacket I'd never seen before. My mother followed, carrying 2 champagne glasses. Then Olivia appeared. She looked radiant. White summer dress. Expensive sunglasses, fresh manicure, professional makeup, like someone about to step into a travel magazine. She smiled at me, not warmly, almost absent-mindedly, the kind of smile people give hotel staff. "Can you grab the last bag?" she asked. No good morning, no hug, no mention of my birthday. I picked up the final suitcase. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. My father checked his watch. "We should leave now." "Leave?" I frowned. "Where are you going?" He looked surprised by the question. "For Olivia's honeymoon." My heartbeat skipped. "Honeymoon?" Olivia laughed. "You forgot." Forgot? I hadn't forgotten. No one had ever told me. She had gotten married 3 weeks earlier in a tiny courthouse ceremony because, according to my parents, they couldn't afford both a wedding and a honeymoon. Now suddenly, there was a luxury van, designer luggage, champagne, a private driver. None of it made sense. My mother adjusted Olivia's necklace. "We wanted this to be unforgettable." Then she kissed her forehead. "I've waited so long to give you this." Something inside my chest tightened. I looked around. The balloons, the flowers, the wrapped boxes, the bakery box. None of it was for me. Every decoration, every ribbon, every dollar had been for Olivia. I swallowed hard, trying not to jump to conclusions, trying not to ruin another family moment. Then I quietly asked, "What about today?" My mother looked confused. "What about it?" "My birthday." Silence. Complete silence. My father's eyes slowly shifted toward my mother. My mother looked at Olivia. Olivia frowned. "Wait." She pulled out her phone. "No." She opened the calendar. "Oh." She looked up. "It's today." No apology. No embarrassment. Just surprise, like someone realizing they had forgotten to buy milk. My mother covered her mouth. "Oh my God." For one ridiculous second, I thought she actually felt guilty. Instead she sighed. "I knew there was something important this week." My father rubbed his forehead. "We've just been so focused on the trip." Focused. Such a harmless word. It somehow carried 30 years of disappointment inside it. Olivia rolled her eyes. "Can we not do this right now?" Do what? Exist. My mother stepped closer. We'll celebrate when we get back. Next week. Like birthdays waited patiently on shelves until families found time. I nodded automatically, because that's what I'd always done. Accepted. Adjusted. Shrunk myself. The driver interrupted. We're running behind schedule. My father immediately grabbed Olivia's suitcase. Not mine. Not even a glance in my direction. As they started loading into the van, I noticed the bakery box was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Maybe that really was mine. I rushed back inside, opened it. Inside sat an elegant 3-tier travel-themed cake. Across the top, written in gold icing, Bon voyage Olivia and Ethan. Not even one tiny cupcake remained. I stood there staring at it, my reflection blurred across the clear plastic lid. 30 years old, standing alone in my parents' kitchen, holding someone else's celebration. Outside, laughter echoed through the driveway. Then engines started. I walked back to the front door, just as the van began pulling away. No one looked back, not even once. I stood there until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. The balloons floated quietly behind me. The flowers filled the house with their sweet smell. The silence somehow hurt more than any argument ever could. Then my phone vibrated. One notification. Instagram. Patricia Brooks posted a new story. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I opened it, and what I saw made forgetting my birthday feel like the smallest betrayal of the entire day. I should have closed the app. Instead, I tapped the story. The first image showed my parents standing beside Olivia and Ethan in front of the luxury van. Everyone was smiling as if the day had been carefully planned for months. Across the screen, my mother had written, "Finally giving our little princess the honeymoon she's always dreamed of. Every sacrifice was worth it. Every sacrifice." The words hit harder than forgetting my birthday, because I suddenly understood something that made my stomach twist. Those sacrifices had never been theirs. For years, whenever my parents claimed money was tight, I quietly covered expenses they couldn't handle. Property taxes, insurance renewals, emergency repairs, accountant fees. Every time they sounded overwhelmed, I stepped in without expecting anything back. They always insisted they would pay me later. They never did, and I never asked. Now I was staring at thousands of dollars wrapped in first-class tickets, luxury hotels, private transfers, and champagne. Money had never been the problem. I simply hadn't been worth spending it on. Another story appeared. My father raised a glass inside the airport lounge while Olivia laughed beside him. Some daughters deserve the world. I couldn't breathe for a second. Some daughters. Not all. The words weren't directed at me. They didn't need to be. After 30 years, I already knew exactly where I stood. I locked my phone and looked around the empty house. Just an hour earlier, I believed every decoration downstairs had been waiting for me. Now the balloons looked ridiculous, like decorations left behind after someone else's party. I started pulling them down one by one. Each pop echoed through the silent house. By the 5th balloon, my eyes were burning. Not because they had forgotten, because forgetting had become normal. What shattered me was realizing they had remembered something much bigger. Just not me. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my aunt, Denise. For one brief moment, I smiled. Maybe someone remembered. "Emily, did they surprise you?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The birthday brunch." The smile disappeared. "What brunch?" Silence. Patricia told everyone she couldn't invite us because you wanted something private. I closed my eyes. A cold wave ran through my body. There wasn't any brunch. Denise stopped speaking. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she whispered, "Emily, they told the whole family today was entirely about you." The room suddenly felt smaller. My parents hadn't simply forgotten. They had lied to everyone. No one had called because they believed I was celebrating somewhere else. Even the people who loved me had been kept away. I thanked my aunt before ending the call. Then I sat alone on the kitchen floor. Not crying, just trying to understand why lying had been easier than admitting they hadn't planned a single minute for me. Another notification appeared. This time it wasn't Instagram. It was my cousin Megan. She had sent me a screenshot. Family group chat. Patricia, please don't mention Emily's birthday today. We don't want her feeling overshadowed during Olivia's honeymoon surprise. Richard replied with a thumbs up. Olivia answered with 3 heart emojis. Someone asked, "Are you celebrating Emily later?" My mother responded almost immediately, "We'll figure something out next week." I stared at the screen. My birthday hadn't slipped their minds. They had discussed it, planned around it, decided it could wait. That realization hurt infinitely more than forgetting ever could. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, Mom. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded cheerful, like nothing had happened. "We landed safely." I said nothing. She continued talking about the airport, the weather, the hotel view. 5 full minutes passed before she finally remembered why she'd called. "Oh, and happy birthday." Flat. Quick. Like checking an item off a grocery list. "I've been thinking," she continued. "We'll take you to dinner once we're back." I looked at the untouched decorations. The balloons were never for me. Silence. "They were already here," she answered carefully. "Yes. I just thought." She stopped, then chose honesty. It wasn't practical to decorate twice. Twice. She actually said it. Buying decorations for me would have been impractical. I laughed, not because anything was funny, because I had finally reached the point where disappointment no longer surprised me. It only confirmed what I'd always suspected. She grew irritated. "I don't understand why you're making this into something so dramatic." There it was, the familiar script. Ignore, minimize, blame. "I turned 30 today." "I know." "No, you remembered sometime after boarding your flight." Another silence, longer this time. Then my father's voice appeared in the background. "Who is she talking to?" Mom covered the phone for a second before answering him. "It's Emily." His response came back without hesitation. "Tell her we'll deal with this later." Deal with this. As if I had become an inconvenience, interrupting their vacation. Mom repeated his words almost exactly. "We'll deal with this when we get home." Something inside me became incredibly calm. Not healed, not stronger, just quiet. For the first time, I wasn't trying to convince them that I mattered. I simply realized I never would. "Enjoy the honeymoon," I said. Then I hung up. That evening, I walked into my home office. On the corner of my desk sat my laptop. Next to it was a thick blue folder. Inside were years of financial records, insurance renewals, tax payments, mortgage reminders, vendor contracts, debt restructurings. Every single file my parents had asked me to look over because I was so much better with numbers. I had always believed I was helping family. Now, for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I simply stopped. Not out of revenge. Not yet. Just stopped carrying people who had spent 30 years pretending I weighed nothing. I reached for the folder. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID made me freeze. Nathan Cole, my former boss. The only person who had ever questioned why I was solving problems that weren't mine. I answered. He didn't waste a second. "Emily, I just received something addressed to your parents." I frowned. "What kind of something?" His voice turned unusually serious. "I think someone's been hiding how bad their finances really are." My hand tightened around the blue folder. And suddenly, Olivia's expensive honeymoon didn't look like the biggest secret in my family's life anymore. Nathan rarely called without a reason. If he did, it meant he had already verified the facts twice. I closed the blue folder without opening it and pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "What did you receive?" "A collection notice." My stomach tightened. "For my parents?" "Addressed to them. Sent to my office by mistake because your father never updated an old mailing address." I frowned. "My office? When I helped your father refinance one of his business loans years ago, he listed my firm as an additional contact. Apparently, no one ever changed the paperwork." Nathan paused. I wasn't going to open it. Another pause. But the envelope had already been damaged during delivery. I walked to the window. The driveway was still empty. The decorations were still inside the house. Everything looked exactly as it had that morning. Only now I felt like I was standing inside someone else's life. "What does it say?" His answer came quietly. "They're 93 days behind." 93 days behind on what? Several things. I didn't respond. Nathan continued. "Mortgage. A beat. Business credit. Another. And 2 personal loans." I slowly sat down. That couldn't be right. My parents constantly talked about being careful with money. They lectured everyone about financial responsibility. They criticized people who lived beyond their means. My father loved saying, "Debt is what happens when people refuse to grow up." Now, he was drowning in it. Nathan's next sentence landed even harder. "Emily, they've been borrowing money to make minimum payments on other loans." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he asked something that completely changed the direction of my thoughts. "Are you still managing their payment calendar?" I looked toward the blue folder. Every due date, every renewal, every reminder, every spreadsheet, every password, every automatic payment, everything. "Yes." "And are you still making the transfers when they ask?" I swallowed. "Yes." He let out a slow breath. "I thought so." That sentence echoed in my head long after the call ended. He thought so. As if he'd already suspected I wasn't simply helping. I was keeping the entire structure from collapsing. I finally opened the blue folder. Neat tabs divided every category. Insurance, taxes, utilities, loan schedules, business expenses, emergency reserves. Everything was color-coded in my handwriting. I flipped through page after page. Every month looked the same. A reminder from my father. A call from my mother. An excuse. Then me. Fixing it. Again. Sometimes I transferred money temporarily. Sometimes I negotiated extensions. Sometimes I called companies pretending to be my father because he didn't have time. I had convinced myself this was what good daughters did. Now, looking at years of records spread across my desk, it looked less like love and more like unpaid labor. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I ignored it. She called again. Ignored. A third time. Finally, she sent a message. "Did you remember to pay the insurance today?" Not. "How are you feeling?" Not. "I'm sorry." Not even. "Happy birthday again." The first thing she remembered about me was another responsibility. I stared at the message for nearly a minute. Then I locked my phone. Without answering. It was the first request from my parents I had ignored in years. The silence that followed felt strangely terrifying. And strangely peaceful. That evening, another notification appeared. Olivia had started posting honeymoon photos. Private villa. Ocean view. Champagne. Luxury spa. Infinity pool. Every picture carried another caption. "Worth every sacrifice. Dad made this dream come true. Best parents in the world." Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. People calling them the perfect family. I kept scrolling. Then one picture stopped me. It wasn't Olivia. It was my father. He was signing the hotel receipt. The credit card was clearly visible. Not the number. The color. Black. I recognized it instantly. It wasn't his business card. It wasn't my mother's. It was the emergency card I had added them to years ago. The one I maintained. The one linked to an account I supervised for family emergencies. I zoomed in. The last 4 digits. They matched. A chill ran through me. No, that couldn't be possible. I opened my banking app. The emergency account was still there. Available balance. Far lower than it should have been. I refreshed. Same number. Again. Same number. Someone had been using it. Not once. Repeatedly. My pulse started racing. I opened the transaction history. Airport transfers. Luxury hotel deposit. Travel insurance. Private excursion. Every charge had happened over the past 48 hours. No one had asked me. No one had even told me. They had simply assumed the account existed for them. I stared at the screen. Then at the family photos hanging across the hallway. For years I believed they depended on my kindness. Now I realized something much uglier. They depended on my silence. The phone rang. "Dad." I answered. Not because I wanted to. Because I wanted to hear what mattered enough for him to interrupt his vacation. He didn't waste time. Did you see your mother's message? Yes. Then why didn't you answer? I was busy. His tone sharpened immediately. The insurance has to be paid today. I looked at the transaction history, still open on my screen. So does your honeymoon, apparently. Silence. Then, what does that mean? It means someone used the emergency account. Another pause. Finally, he answered without the slightest embarrassment. I assumed you wouldn't mind. Not. I'm sorry. Not. I forgot to tell you. Just. I assumed. I closed my eyes. You assumed wrong. For the first time in my life, I ended the call before he did. The house became impossibly quiet. No ringing phones. No messages. No requests. Just me, the blue folder, and years of responsibilities that suddenly felt optional. I pulled my laptop closer, logged into every financial portal, every calendar, every automatic reminder, every payment dashboard. One by one, I removed my personal notifications. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply stopped reminding myself to save people who had never remembered me. The final notification disappeared from my calendar. The screen looked strangely empty, almost peaceful. I leaned back. For the first time in years, none of my parents' responsibilities were sitting on tomorrow's schedule. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong, because less than 10 minutes later, someone knocked on my front door. Hard. 3 heavy knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my heart nearly stopped. Standing on my porch, holding a thick stack of unopened envelopes, was my father's accountant. For a moment, I didn't move. The knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate hits that sounded nothing like a neighbor dropping by. I opened the door. Standing in front of me was Daniel Harper, my father's accountant. He looked exhausted. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, and the stack of envelopes in his hands was thick enough to make my stomach tighten before he said a single word. Emily. He hesitated. I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I looked at the envelopes. Most were stamped in red. Final notice. Past due. Immediate response required. My chest tightened. I think you have the wrong address. I wish I did. He held the envelopes but didn't hand them to me. I've been trying to reach your parents for 3 days. They're on vacation. I know. His answer came so quickly that I realized he'd already tried. They stopped answering my calls the morning they left. I frowned. They knew you were looking for them? Yes. A cold sensation spread through my body. This wasn't bad timing. They had deliberately disappeared. Daniel looked at me carefully. Can I come in for 5 minutes? I stepped aside. The moment he entered, his eyes landed on the balloons, still hanging from the ceiling. The flowers, the ribbons. Then he looked at me. They really left today. I nodded. He didn't ask another question. Maybe he already understood enough. We sat across from each other at the dining table. The same table where, just yesterday, I believed I would celebrate turning 30. Daniel placed the envelopes in front of me. I haven't opened these. I can't. They're addressed to your parents. Then why bring them here? He rubbed his forehead. Because every time I've needed something over the last 5 years, I've ended up talking to you. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because it was cruel. Because it was true. Everyone who dealt with my parents eventually stopped looking for them. They looked for me instead. Daniel sighed. I need to ask you something. I waited. Have you stopped managing their finances? The question caught me off guard. Yesterday. His shoulders dropped. I knew it. What do you mean? He leaned back. I've watched this family for almost 7 years. I know exactly who answers emails, who catches mistakes, who remembers deadlines, and who quietly fixes disasters before anyone notices. I didn't respond. Because he wasn't wrong. He looked at the unopened envelopes again. They think they're surviving because your father is a brilliant businessman. He shook his head. They've been surviving because of you. The room became unbearably quiet. Not because it was new information. Because hearing someone else say it made it impossible to deny anymore. Daniel stood. I shouldn't stay. He slid one business card across the table. If they ask you to fix anything. He paused. Call me first. Why? Because this time. He looked directly into my eyes. I don't think they can afford another mistake. He walked toward the front door, then stopped. One more thing. I looked up. They're expecting a payment tomorrow morning. What payment? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a folded document from his briefcase. Just read the title. I unfolded it. Bridge Loan Extension Agreement. My heart skipped. Bridge loans were emergency financing. The kind businesses used when they had no other option. The due amount printed on the first page made my hands tremble. Almost $180,000. Tomorrow. I looked up. My parents borrowed this. Daniel nodded. They already extended it twice. What happens if they don't pay? They lose more than money. Before I could ask another question, he quietly left. The front door had barely closed when my phone exploded with notifications. One after another. Family group chat. Olivia had uploaded another 20 honeymoon photos. Sunset dinner. Private yacht. Luxury shopping. Wine tasting. Then a video. She lifted a champagne glass toward the camera. To the best parents in the world. Everyone around the table applauded. Even strangers sitting nearby smiled. I watched until the end. Then I noticed something. For less than 2 seconds, my father reached for the bill. His smile disappeared. He whispered something to my mother. She immediately looked nervous. Olivia grabbed the camera and turned it away. The video ended abruptly. I replayed it. Again. Something had happened. Something they hadn't wanted anyone to see. Less than 5 minutes later, Mom called. I answered, not because I wanted to talk, because curiosity had replaced disappointment. Her voice sounded unusually tense. Emily. A long pause. Is everything okay with the emergency account? There it was. Not concern. Not love. Need. What do you mean? It was declined. I said nothing. She continued. The hotel said the payment didn't go through. I leaned back in my chair. I removed my notifications. Another silence. No. I mean, did you change anything? I stopped managing it. She sounded genuinely confused. What does that mean? It means I'm no longer watching your finances. But you've always done that. Exactly. Always. I won't anymore. I heard my father take the phone from her. His voice came sharp. This isn't funny. I know. You need to transfer money immediately. No. Another silence. Longer. He lowered his voice. Emily, we'll discuss your birthday when we get home. My eyes closed. Even now, he still believed my pain could be negotiated, like offering dessert after forgetting dinner. This isn't about my birthday anymore. He frowned. Then what is it about? I looked at the bridge loan agreement, still lying on the table. You'll figure it out. I ended the call. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then another notification appeared, this time from the bank. Emergency account access updated successfully. I frowned. Updated? I hadn't changed anything. I opened the account settings. Someone had tried to add another authorized user. Just 23 minutes earlier, the request had failed automatically because my approval was required. I stared at the screen. They weren't just expecting me to keep saving them anymore. They were trying to gain even more access. Without asking. Without telling me. Without thinking I'd ever notice. I immediately froze every pending authorization request. Changed every security setting connected to my personal login. Enabled additional verification. Only after everything was locked did I finally breathe again. But before I could even set my phone down, it rang once more. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. A calm female voice spoke. Miss Brooks. Yes. My name is Sandra. I'm calling from your parents' bank. My heartbeat instantly accelerated. We need to speak with you. Urgently. For a few seconds, I couldn't answer. The bank. Out of everyone who could have called me, the bank was the last one I expected. This is Emily. The woman's voice remained calm, but there was urgency beneath every word. I'm sorry to contact you directly, but your name appears repeatedly in relation to several financial authorizations connected to Richard and Patricia Brooks. My pulse immediately accelerated. I no longer manage their finances. I understand. Another brief pause. But according to our records, you've been the person resolving most irregularities on these accounts for years. Resolving. Not owning. Not benefiting. Cleaning up. Always cleaning up. What happened? There was an unsuccessful attempt this afternoon to increase the credit limit on an emergency account. I already knew which account she meant. I blocked the authorization. Yes. Her voice became even more careful. That's why the request failed. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Someone hadn't just tried to use the account. They had tried to expand it, without even speaking to me. Sandra continued. There were also multiple login attempts from another location. I frowned. My parents are traveling. We're aware. Those attempts originated from the same region where their cards are currently being used. I leaned against the kitchen counter. So they try to access my credentials. I'm not allowed to speculate. But she stopped. I strongly recommend changing every password connected to your financial profiles immediately. I already have. Good. She hesitated one last time. Ms. Brooks, please be very careful about approving anything over the next few days. The call ended. I remained standing in complete silence. Yesterday, I believe my biggest problem was having forgotten my birthday. Today, someone was trying to pull me into a financial collapse I hadn't created, and I was beginning to understand why. I carried the blue folder back to my office. For the first time, I wasn't opening it to solve problems. I was opening it to understand them. Page after page revealed something I had never noticed before. Not because it had been hidden, because I had never stopped long enough to see the pattern. Every financial emergency followed the same cycle. Dad made an impulsive decision. Money disappeared. Bills accumulated. Mom panicked. Then they called me. I negotiated, rescheduled, transferred money, organized payments, protected their credit. Weeks later, the cycle started again. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't unexpected expenses. It was a lifestyle, one built on the certainty that I would always catch them before they hit the ground. That certainty ended yesterday. They just didn't know it yet. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the family group chat. Olivia had posted a selfie from a luxury boutique. Designer bags cover the couch behind her. Her caption made my stomach turn. Dad says memories are worth more than money. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I had spent years making sure they actually had money. She uploaded another picture, then another. A diamond bracelet, a pair of luxury watches, a private shopping appointment. Every new image answered questions I hadn't even asked. The honeymoon wasn't simply expensive. It was completely out of control. Then I noticed something almost no one else would. On one shopping receipt sitting beside her coffee, part of the payment summary was visible. Declined. The receipt disappeared almost immediately. She probably hadn't even noticed it was in the frame. But I had. Minutes later, every photo vanished. Deleted. Something had already gone wrong. The phone rang. Olivia. For the first time since leaving. She was calling me directly. I let it ring. Again. 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 On the fourth attempt, I answered. She didn't say hello. What did you do? Her voice was sharp. What are you talking about? Our cards keep getting declined. They're your cards. They're connected to Dad's accounts. Exactly. So fix it. I almost smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. Because that single sentence explained our entire relationship. Not, can you help? Not, please. Just, fix it. I can't. You can. I won't. Silence. Then her tone changed instantly. You'd really ruin my honeymoon over a birthday? There it was again. They still believed everything came back to one forgotten day. No. I answer quietly. I'm refusing to keep financing choices that were never mine. She laughed. Cold. You're being dramatic. No. I'm being finished. Before she could answer, I ended the call. An hour later, Nathan arrived. I hadn't invited him. He simply texted, "I'm outside." When I opened the door, he carried a slim leather portfolio. Nothing else. He walked into my office and looked at the documents covering the desk. "So, you finally started reading." I nodded. "I should have done it years ago." He didn't disagree. Instead, he opened the portfolio. Inside was a printed timeline, dates, loan approvals, refinancing agreements, credit extensions, emergency transfers, everything arranged chronologically. "What is this?" "The story your parents never told you." He pointed to the oldest document. "This was the first loan, then another. This was taken to pay off the first one. Another. This one paid the second." My heartbeat became heavier with every page. "They've been refinancing debt with more debt for years." Nathan nodded. "They survived because deadlines kept moving." He looked directly at me. "And because someone always made sure nothing exploded before the next payment." Someone. Not Richard. Not Patricia. Me. Then, he pointed to the most recent document. Unlike the others, it wasn't highlighted. It wasn't marked. It carried a bright yellow sticky note. Only 4 handwritten words. "Final extension. No exceptions." Nathan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I already understood. There wasn't another safety net. If this payment failed, everything would begin collapsing. Not slowly. Immediately. Nathan closed the portfolio. "I'm going to ask you one question." I waited. "When they call, are you planning to save them again?" I looked toward the family photos hanging across the hallway. 30 years, 30 birthdays, thousands of quiet sacrifices, one forgotten daughter. I took a long breath, then answered with more certainty than I'd ever felt before. "No." Nathan gave a single nod, almost as if he'd been waiting years to hear that answer. Then, just as he reached the front door, my phone buzzed again. A breaking news alert wasn't what appeared. It was much worse. A notification from the bank. "Richard Brooks has submitted an emergency authorization request requiring your immediate approval." I opened it, and my blood ran cold. He wasn't asking for a few $1,000s. He was asking for access to every account under my name. I stared at the notification for several seconds. It had to be a mistake. Richard Brooks had submitted an emergency authorization request. Requested access, full administrative permission. Not to one account, not to the emergency fund. To every financial profile connected to my identity. Checking, savings, investment accounts, credit management, everything. At the bottom was a single button. Approve. Below it, decline. I felt strangely calm. 30 years ago, I would have pressed approve without reading another word. 30 minutes ago, I might have hesitated. Now, I pressed decline. The confirmation screen appeared. Authorization permanently denied. I didn't even blink. 5 seconds later, Dad called. I let it ring. Again, again, again. Then Mom. Then Olivia. Then Dad once more. By the 10th missed call, my phone felt heavier than the blue folder on my desk. They weren't calling because they loved me. They were calling because, for the first time in years, a door had closed. 2 minutes later, a message arrived from my father. "Emily, this isn't the time to be emotional. Call me immediately." I almost deleted it. Instead, I locked the screen. Another message. "The bank made a mistake. Just approve the request." Another. "Stop making this harder than it already is." Not once did he ask how I was. Not once did he apologize. Even now, after everything, my birthday had disappeared from the conversation. The only emergency was money. Nathan hadn't left yet. He looked at my phone lighting up every few seconds. "They finally noticed." I nodded. "They're panicking." "No." He corrected me quietly. "They're losing control." There was a difference. Panic came from fear. This came from losing access to the person who had quietly protected them from every consequence. Nathan picked up one of the older folders. "Can I show you something?" He spread several documents across the desk. Each one carried my father's signature. At first, nothing looked unusual. Then Nathan pointed to the dates. Look closely. The approvals happen days before almost every family celebration. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, Olivia's graduation, her engagement, even her courthouse wedding. Every event followed the same pattern. My parents borrowed money, spent it pretending they were generous, then expected me to clean up the debt afterward. I slowly looked up. My entire family life was financed with loans. Nathan didn't answer. He simply slid one final document toward me. This one wasn't signed by my father. It was signed by me, years earlier. An authorization allowing me to negotiate with creditors on Richard Brooks' behalf. I barely remembered signing it. Dad had said it was only to save time. Nathan tapped the paper. This document made you their safety net. I looked at my own signature. Back then, it had felt like trust. Now, it looked like permission to be used forever. My phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. Dad. Against my better judgment, I played it. His voice was completely different. No anger. No authority. Only urgency. Emily, pick up. A pause. I know you're upset. Another pause. But you don't understand what's happening. He inhaled sharply. If this payment doesn't go through tomorrow. His voice stopped, almost like he couldn't bring himself to say the rest. Then the recording ended. No explanation. No apology. Just fear. For the first time in my life, I heard my father sounding smaller than me. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it only made me wonder how long he had known everything was falling apart. That answer came sooner than I expected. The doorbell rang. Again. Harder this time. Nathan looked through the window. Stay here. He opened the door. Standing outside was Daniel Harper. But he wasn't alone. A woman in a navy blazer stood beside him carrying another folder. She introduced herself immediately. My name is Karen. I'm legal counsel for Brooks Manufacturing. Legal counsel? I frowned. My parents hired a lawyer. Karen looked surprised. They told us you were handling today's decisions. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Even now, they were sending people to me instead of facing the consequences themselves. Karen opened the folder. I'm afraid I need an answer before the end of the business day. What answer? She carefully placed one document on the table. It wasn't another loan. It wasn't another overdue notice. It was much worse. Personal guarantee enforcement. Nathan's expression changed instantly. He read the first page before looking back at me. This changes everything. My pulse quickened. What is it? Nathan answered instead of Karen. Your father personally guaranteed the company's debt. I frowned. So, if the company defaults, Karen quietly finished the sentence. They can pursue personal assets. The room suddenly felt colder. House, cars, savings, everything. I looked at Karen. What does this have to do with me? She hesitated, then slowly turned another page. Near the bottom, my name appeared, not as guarantor, not as borrower, as emergency financial contact. I closed my eyes. Of course, even here, they had placed me between themselves and disaster. Without ever telling me, Karen spoke gently. We're not asking you to pay. Relief barely had time to appear. Before she added, we're asking whether your father still has access to the emergency reserve he listed during negotiations. Nathan immediately looked at me. He already knew the answer. I answered honestly, no. Karen nodded once, then quietly closed the folder. I was hoping you'd say that. I blinked. You were. She gave me a tired smile. Because if you had approved today's authorization, she paused. Your personal assets might have become exposed as well. Silence. Complete silence. I slowly looked toward the notification still sitting on my phone. Authorization declined. Had I approved it, I wouldn't simply have rescued my parents again. I might have gone down with them. Nathan exhaled deeply. They never told you the real reason they wanted access. No, they couldn't. Karen looked directly at me. They needed your accounts because they no longer had enough left in theirs. The sentence echoed through the room. Not enough left, which meant only one thing. The luxury honeymoon, the shopping, The hotels, the champagne, none of it had been paid for with money they actually had. Before I could process that realization, Karen's phone rang. She answered immediately. Her face lost all color. She looked at me, then at Nathan, and quietly said the words that changed everything. They've just been detained overseas. Detained. For a second, I thought I had misheard. Karen lowered the phone slowly, as if saying the words too quickly would somehow make them more real. They haven't been arrested, she clarified. But they were stopped from leaving the country. Nathan immediately understood what that meant. The hotel. Karen nodded. And the credit card company. Everything suddenly clicked together. The declined payments. The failed authorization. The frantic phone calls. The desperate requests for access to my accounts. They hadn't been trying to protect a vacation. They had been trying to escape a financial disaster that had finally caught up with them. Less than a minute later, my phone exploded. Dad. Mom. Olivia. Again. 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 Then a message. Please answer. I stared at it. Another message arrived almost immediately. This is serious. Then another. We need you. Not. We miss you. Not. We're sorry. Only. We need you. Nathan quietly looked at me. You don't have to answer. For the first time in my life, I believe someone. I placed the phone face down. It didn't stay silent for long. A video call came through. Dad. I declined it. 5 seconds later, Mom called. Declined. Then Olivia. Declined. Then another video call. Then another. Finally, a text from my father. If you don't answer, we're going to lose everything. I read it twice, then slowly typed my first response of the day. You already lost me yesterday. I pressed send. Nothing else. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Unknown international number. Karen looked at the screen. That's probably the hotel. I answered. The hotel manager introduced himself calmly. He explained that my parents had listed me as the emergency contact for the reservation. Of course they had. Without asking. Without telling me. He apologized before continuing. The remaining balance has not been paid. I understand. We've offered several solutions. And they informed us their daughter would resolve the situation. I almost laughed. Even thousands of miles away, I was still expected to clean up the mess. I'm not paying. A brief silence followed. Then the manager surprised me. I'm actually relieved to hear that. I frowned. What do you mean? He lowered his voice. They've repeated that sentence for almost 24 hours. Our daughter will fix it. Our daughter always fixes everything. The words settled heavily in the room. Not because they were new. Because they were true. That had been my role for years. Not daughter. Solution. The manager continued. We'll proceed according to policy. What happens now? The reservation will be terminated. The remaining services have already been canceled. I looked toward Karen. She nodded quietly. No one could stop what was coming anymore. When the call ended, Nathan smiled for the first time. Not because anyone was suffering. Because the cycle had finally broken. Another notification appeared. This one from Olivia. A voice message. Against my better judgment, I played it. She was crying. Real crying. Not the dramatic kind she'd used growing up whenever she wanted our parents to rescue her. This sounded different. They're saying we have to leave the hotel. Her breathing shook. They canceled everything. Another pause. Dad says none of this would have happened if you weren't being selfish. I closed my eyes. Even now, responsibility traveled in only one direction. Toward me. I deleted the message without answering. Karen checked the time. They're running out of options. Nathan looked at her. How long? She didn't hesitate. Hours. No one spoke. Outside, the sun had already begun to set. Inside, 30 years of guilt were disappearing with it. For the first time, I wasn't calculating payments. I wasn't negotiating deadlines. I wasn't opening spreadsheets. I was simply sitting in complete silence. And somehow, that silence felt freer than anything I'd experienced in years. Just after sunset, the front doorbell rang again. Daniel Harper. This time he wasn't carrying envelopes. Only a single folder. He placed it gently on the table. They signed this before traveling. I opened it. It was a power of attorney, prepared only 4 days earlier, giving me authority to negotiate with banks, creditors, and financial institutions on their behalf, without ever asking my permission, without even telling me it existed. I looked up. They expected this. Daniel nodded. They knew the trip could go wrong. Nathan slowly exhaled. They never planned to pay for that honeymoon. No one disagreed, because every document on the table pointed to exactly the same conclusion. The vacation had never been funded. It had simply been postponed until someone else paid the bill. Someone, meaning me. I quietly closed the folder. Then I tore the unsigned acknowledgement page in half. Not the legal document, just the page requiring my acceptance. I would never activate it, never become their emergency exit again. Daniel watched without saying a word. Then my phone vibrated one last time. A message from Dad. Just one sentence. Please. I was wrong. I stared at those 4 words. The first apology I'd ever received from him. 30 years late. Nathan looked at me. Do you believe him? I thought about the forgotten birthdays, the unpaid debts, the lies, the honeymoon, the emergency account, the attempts to access my finances, the calls that only came when they needed something. Then I quietly locked my phone. No. Karen gathered her documents. They'll be back tomorrow. Nathan looked at me. And when they are, I finished his sentence. They'll finally have to face me. Because for the first time, they wouldn't be returning home to the daughter who fixed everything. They'd be returning to the woman they had spent 30 years creating. And this time, I wasn't going to save them. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. Not because I had slept well, because I already knew they were coming. At 8:17 a.m., a car stopped outside my house. I looked through the window. The luxury luggage was gone. So were the smiles. My parents stepped out first. They looked 10 years older than when they'd left 3 days earlier. Behind them, Olivia climbed out of the back seat wearing the same clothes she traveled in. Her expensive sunglasses were gone. Her hair was tied back carelessly. She looked exhausted. For the first time in her life, she looked like someone who had heard the word no. 3 of them stood outside my front door. None of them knocked immediately, almost as if they were hoping I would come outside and make everything easier. I didn't. Eventually, Dad raised his hand and knocked. Slowly, not like the man who had spent years ordering everyone around. Like someone asking permission. I opened the door. No one spoke. The silence lasted almost 15 seconds. Then Dad finally looked at me. I owe you an apology. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I simply waited. He swallowed. We shouldn't have forgotten your birthday. That was it. One sentence. As if everything that had happened over the previous week had started and ended with one forgotten date. I looked at him calmly. This stopped being about my birthday a long time ago. No one argued, because they knew I was right. Mom stepped forward. Her eyes were red. We've made mistakes. Mistakes. Interesting choice of words. Forgetting to buy milk was a mistake. Putting your daughter last for 30 years was a decision. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. The movement was small, but all 3 of them noticed. Her hand slowly dropped. I had never stepped away from my mother before. Not once. That tiny gesture hurt her more than any speech could have. Olivia finally spoke. I lost everything. I looked at her. No. You lost a vacation. I lost 30 birthdays. She looked down immediately. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. Dad took a folder from his briefcase. I know you don't want to hear excuses. He placed it on the table. But I need you to see this. I opened it. Inside were years of financial statements, loan agreements, interest schedules, overdue notices. Almost every page had handwritten calculations. Different ink, different dates. Some pages were covered with corrections. Dad wasn't pretending anymore. The business had been failing for years. Every loan had only delayed the next crisis. Every refinance had bought another few months. Then I noticed something. The oldest overdue notice was dated nearly 8 years earlier. 8 years. exactly when they had first started asking me to help with small financial things. My chest tightened. It hadn't been temporary. It had never been temporary. They had quietly built their survival around me, without ever telling me the truth. Dad sat down. For the first time in my life, he looked smaller than I did. I kept thinking I could fix everything. I thought one more contract, one more loan, one more month. His voice broke. I didn't realize I was asking you to carry my life. I believed him. That surprised me. Not because he hadn't lied, but because, for the first time, he wasn't lying now. Then he looked directly at me. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. He nodded. I know. No arguments. No manipulation. No guilt. Just acceptance. Mom quietly wiped away tears. I should have protected you. You should have. I didn't. No. Another silence. Then she whispered, I don't expect you to forgive me either. I appreciated that sentence more than any apology she had offered, because it wasn't asking me to erase the past. It was simply acknowledging it. Olivia remained standing near the doorway. She looked around my house, not at the furniture, not at the walls, at the life she had never bothered to notice. You really did all of this alone. I smiled sadly. I always did. She nodded once. I didn't know. No. You never asked. Again. She had no answer. Dad slowly pushed another paper across the table. I've already started selling the company. I looked down. A signed purchase agreement. Not enough to make him wealthy. Enough to pay employees. Enough to pay creditors. Enough to stop borrowing. For once, he wasn't asking me to rescue him. He was fixing what he still could. Nathan had once told me that real accountability begins the moment someone stops looking for another person to carry their consequences. For the first time, my father had arrived at that moment. He stood. So, this is goodbye. I frowned. I'm not asking to come back into your life. I'm not asking for holidays or birthdays. He smiled sadly. I'm just asking you to know that you deserved better than the parents we were. No one cried. No dramatic music. No hugs. Just truth. Sometimes, that hurts more. They walked toward the front door. Mom stopped once. She looked back. Happy birthday, Emily. 3 days late. I smiled politely. Thank you. Nothing more. Because some moments can't be repaired by saying the right words. Only by living differently afterward. She understood. Then they left. 6 months later, the house was quieter than it had ever been. Not lonely. Peaceful. I celebrated my 31st birthday with a handful of close friends. No balloons trying to fool me. No fake surprises. No expectations. Just people who had chosen to be there. Nathan handed me a small gift. Inside was a leather notebook. The first page contained only one sentence. Never confuse being needed with being loved. I closed the notebook, smiled, and realized something. My parents hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had forgotten me. Those were never the same thing. The day they finally understood the difference, it was already too late.